All right, let's move on to question number 5. Our child has made great progress with selective mutism, but still speaks only to certain people, and we want to help expand that circle. Do you have practical strategies teachers can use in the classroom to encourage more peer interaction and verbal communication? So this is really a question for teachers.
Well, it's no for parents too. I'll tell you why, because the basic concepts aren't understood yet. So definitely consider the SM in the school conference for sure, because we talk a ton about this. But comfort and connection precede communication. Comfort precedes communication. Progress doesn't tend to occur in a group. Your child needs to understand that you're not just going to start to talk to random people. It doesn't work that way. And we can't make that child feel it does. It's our job as parents, it's our job as teachers to set the world up, the silent goals, the buddy process. So, how do you build comfort and do strategies away from the group, which is what you need to do? So, you
In
do
the
it through the
classroom.
buddy process. You do it through the buddy process. We
Hmm.
pair and group children, 3 to 5 children, or 2 to 3 kids based on the age and the child's overall anxiety. We pair and group with them. We sit them with them. In small groups next to them in their desk area. All the teachers know. Parents are simultaneously, ideally, working on outside get togethers. We're doing small groups in the room, like spot work, pull in work with other, doing some kind of small group. It could be math manipulatives, it could be reading, it could be anything in the back of the room, in the spot in the room. Pull outs, friendship groups, lunch bunches, clubs, activities away from the group. And we do all of this as a means to set the world up for success to occur. So rather than thinking it as just how do we get us verbalizing with more kids, it's how can we set this up, whether you need accommodations through a formal 504 or an IEP, depending on how your child is functioning in the school. 504s and IEPs and the differences are important. They're in public school. You might want to, I think we have an episode on that, but also like realizing that children do need accommodations and interventions to make that progress. We say this all the time at camp. Children aren't going to walk in and say, hey, do this, ask me questions this way, make sure you sit me with those 2 kids. Make sure when you ask me a question, you give me 5 to 10 seconds to respond. They don't do it. Now, if there is a child that's super proactive and wants to walk in and kind of give a list to their teacher, all right, great. But the majority don't. We need to educate others on how to question, when to question, where to question, and with who to question. And through the setup and through the integration that we will create for a child, for a teen, communication will occur. For
Yeah.
example, reading directions in a small group for a verbal child. That's not having a conversation like, hey, how you doing? What are you doing this weekend? That's the hardest thing to do. The easiest thing is to focus on a task at the level that they can accomplish with teachers or parents or whomever facilitating to make it to help them move. For example, a child is sitting next to a buddy and the child can speak, maybe 1 or 2 words. The teacher approaching and saying, are you guys going to study the environment or government and focus on another child first? That minimizes the expectation on the one child. Then turns to the child with SM. Do you want to study the environment or government? Choice question. Kind of looking at their paper so they're not staring at the child, avoiding direct eye contact.
Yeah.
If the child doesn't answer, re-ask and prompt write and read. Maybe
Yeah.
that child can't talk to the teacher but uses the peer as the intermediary that they
Mhm.
are comfortable with because they built that connection and comfort. They've even had outside get-togethers or they're in a club and they're verbal with that child, maybe not overly initiative and elaborative. So maybe the teacher says, do you want to study the environment or government? No answer. Tell Rebecca. Then we educate the teacher to repeat with that eye contact. So there's strategies, Brandon. That's what's missing. It's relying on that child to go into that scenario and start to talk when that's not fair to the child.
It seems like a lot really falls on the teachers, and
Absolutely.
obviously there's special needs schools and with more accommodations per child, but there's a lot of kids with SM who are in normal schools, public schools, private schools, that it really does fall on the teacher, how good
Yeah.
your teacher is, how invested they want to be, and how much time and energy they want to put into your child.
Look, most teachers go into teaching because they want to help a child. So we tend to find that most teachers, unless they have a real strong kind of view it as they've got to talk, you need to talk, are very receptive to understanding. Because if they've had a child in their class with selective mutism and the child hasn't made a ton of progress, they want to learn.
At this point, is there other teachers, elementary school teachers, middle school teachers that don't know SM exists? Like, has everyone dealt with an SM student at this point?
No, I think there are plenty, unfortunately, as much as that we've tried to educate, and I know the Selective Mutism Association, we've tried to educate through that organization for years. That was when I originally started it, to bring awareness, to
Hmm.
educate. That was the point of the SMA when I started 1,010 years ago, was to bring awareness, because I knew so few people understood my own daughter. So it was about educating, but it's about training.
That was like 20, 30 years ago, not to, age you or anything like that. Sorry about that. But, now I'm talking about now.
No, there are some. Yes, I'd say more know it, and yes, I'm old, but I would say, yes, I am. It's been a while, 1,000,000 kids in 1,000,000 years. I feel like I've been doing it if you add up the hours, but it's okay. I love it. But training is critical. With every family we work with, we want to train the schools, and many schools will fund that through purchase orders, whether it's us or another expert center that really knows how to set up appropriate accommodations interventions. These children need it, and it's based on your child's unique needs. I mean, they need an evaluation to determine their needs. It's not just get a child to talk. You missed the boat. It's about understanding that child's unique needs. And quite a few of them have whys of SM that are stopping them. So if you're treating to speak, you're missing the boat because you're missing the whys that you need to accommodate also.
Well, I really like that question. I think that's the strategies in the classroom are always topics. That's always a topic that comes up. It's always our best performing content from our end, like that we see. And I know that always comes up in a camp too. So
Yeah, I mean, the biggest issue, at camp, we train for the 3 days, Brandon. The last day is school. We do it that way to give everyone the concepts and understanding before we educate on school, because that by that point, they're really understanding their child and their needs, because we're going through it the entire process,
mhm.
during the entire camp process.
It's a ton of great information. Is this the basis of the motivation behind parents that choose to homeschool their kid or choose to take their kid out and put them in a new school? Is like, here's the strategies to their teacher, and the teacher's not implementing it. Like, what do you do when the teacher's not implementing it? Not to add, this might be a separate Ask Dr. E question, but
No, I think it's a good, tangent off this question. I think you have two questions there. One is the homeschool process. The other
mhm.
is like, what
We
do you
have
do?
content on that too.
Yeah, but I think it's important to say that I'm not against homeschooling. Sometimes you hear Dr. E's against homeschooling. I am not against homeschooling. What I am against is lack of social communication opportunity. The kids need to be exposed to other children. They need to learn what it's like to be with other children, conversation starters, even if they're listening and learning from others, not just us from the child. So they need to have that ability to interact and build those skills. You're not born with it. I mean, you
Yeah.
have most are born with the ability to do it, right? There are plenty that, we work with have developmental delays and they skill deficits. That's different. But we need to have those opportunities. Some people homeschool because they didn't feel their school was able to meet their needs, even with a 504 or an IEP, or they were in an environment where homeschooling was very popular. But there are this select few that pull their child out of school without giving the school a chance and will
Yeah.
homeschool because they don't want their child to feel any anxiety, which
Right.
sometimes I don't necessarily agree with.
No, I could definitely see that. You
This
also
is
feel
why
like there's a lot of
training is
pressure.
yeah, this is why training schools is critical. That's why I
Yeah.
did SM in the
Most.
school. Prior to COVID, I was going all, you remember, I would go all around the country and speak in different cities on this, for years about selective mutism, and did SM in the school conferences because school teachers and and look, kids can live in the comfort of their home, right? You've got the percentage of kids that really do struggle in the home environment, rare, but there are. But for the most part, most kids are fine at home in the comfort of their home. So
Yeah.
school is the most obvious setting and the most prevalent setting that you see selective mutism air its head and where those difficulties with social communication occur. So
Right.
of course, in the school where kids spend 8 to 10 hours a day sometimes, they need to learn the skills, and others in that setting need to know how to implement. So
Yeah.
that's where accommodations interventions are critical. This is training is absolutely needed. End of
Yeah.
story, we need it.